Victoria's peak legal body is urging the Baillieu government to rethink its long-awaited anti-corruption commission. The Law Institute of Victoria says in its current form, the commission will be seriously restricted in what it can investigate. James Bennett reports.
The mechanisms we have in this state are simply inadequate.
My personal view has always been against the establishment of such a mechanism.
John Brumby eventually changed his view, but Ted Baillieu had promised it first.
There ought to be an independent, broad-based anti-corruption commission.
The pledge of open, transparent government helped sweep the coalition to power.
There will be no hidden agendas, there will be no spin, there will be no secrecy.
Almost a year after it was due, there's still no date and still no commissioner.
As we said, we'll be making announcements in relation to all of these positions in due course.
Outside of this week's Expenditure Committee hearings, one man who has previously advised on the set-up of similar bodies is asking different questions.
What's the definition of corruption that this body will be pursuing? And unless that's a broad-based definition as originally sort of contemplated by the proposals, then there is enormous difficulties in how the body's actually going to work and whether it's going to be able to do the job.
Is it still fair to call it a broad-based anti-corruption commission?
I think it's too limited to call it that at the moment.
The Coalition's 2010 election policy promised to establish an independent, broad-based anti-corruption commission for Victoria, responsible for exposing and preventing corruption, with jurisdiction over the police and full powers to scrutinise ministers and members of Parliament and their staff. In expenditure hearings this week, Minister responsible Andrew McIntosh defended the new commission.
What these bodies do provide the mechanism not only to investigate and to prevent corrupt activity, but also to assure the people as to the mechanisms are in place for determining and rooting out this sort of corruption.
But Victoria's peak legal body has written a scathing 13-page assessment of the complex web of legislation, finding it falls well short of those goals.
The legislation is almost impossible to actually understand. There are 5 separate Acts of Parliament that will govern this IBAC. The second one is that there really isn't a definition of corrupt conduct, and the IBAC Commissioner, when he's appointed, will need more direction as to what he's able to investigate.
What they've delivered is a definition of corruption so limited that it has to be a serious indictable offence for the Commission to be able to investigate. Now, in no other jurisdiction does that limitation occur. It gets worse. The government also have not included the very important offence of misconduct in public office.
In 2010, the Coalition cited the Windsor Hotel affair as an example of why a new watchdog was needed. But a scandal like the sham public consultation alleged over the Windsor redevelopment may not be investigated by IBAC.
Those broader inquiries about misconduct in public office sometimes lead to investigations which could identify more serious corruption offences, and so we think it's just too limiting not to have those included under the current legislation.
Academics feel that detracts from the original intention of a one-stop shop for corruption complaints.
It's very relevant to be looking at this at the same time that there's talk about an inquest, for example, into the murders of the Hodgson couple, because there is a classic issue of where it looks like Victoria is sort of struggling to find an effective public forum with which to advance an important corruption-related investigation to do with police integrity, and is struggling to find the right forum and have the right agency be able to expose the right issues to the public gaze in order to flush out the necessary information about what actually went on.
Defending the delays, the state government says unlike other states which have set up anti-corruption bodies, Victoria isn't scrambling to respond to a major corruption scandal. The Minister responsible, Andrew McIntosh, says that gives Victoria more time to make sure the system is right from the get-go. Lawyers and academics agree with that approach, but dispute the apparent lack of urgency, pointing to sensational allegations that a public servant sought kickbacks to award a security contract for IBAC itself.
That incident is being investigated by police. While the opposition is sceptical, the delay will ultimately improve the Commission's powers.
This is a model that has not been subjected to large amounts of scrutiny because the government knows that that scrutiny will continue to reveal significant deficiencies in their model.
And the Minister responsible for the Anti-Corruption Commission, Andrew McIntosh, declined our interview request. The Premier, Ted Baillieu, was also unavailable for the 5th week in a row.